Delit is younger than Duncan by several months, shorter than him as well, but he's got more willpower. By the end of the school week they had gathered at the courtyard. Some of the students stayed behind to finish their homework or their lunch. When the time came, Duncan lifted his fists in preparation for Delit to do the same, but Delit remained confused, unaware as to why Duncan was looking at him like a bull about to run through a red curtain. Delit: "What are you doing?" Duncan: "Raise your fists." Delit: "I'm not doing that, no." Duncan: "Have it your way." He produced the sentence in a grim manner before he lunged after Delit. Delit sunk into the ground, ducking as fast as he could. He tried dodging, but Duncan swung around and slammed his knuckles into the bone of Delit's jaw. His face got smacked sideways by gravity pushing down his weight, and like a spike of adrenaline, Delit threw his own fists up and attempted to punch Duncan in the ribs. Duncan is a human boulder, his fists not hesitating to swing back. They're throwing hands all over the place as the kids watch in entertainment. Delit turns his back to Duncan, sprinting across the courtyard. Duncan hunts him down like predator on prey and throws him to the ground. He thought he'd thrust his knuckles first, but Delit's wrist raised his fist, the back of his hand smacking Duncan across the right side of his face. His balled-up fist connecting to Duncan's throat. He coughs out swallowed air, but he doesn't hesitate with his hands. Swinging Delit over his abdomen, he thrusts the kid back onto his feet. Delit attempts to turn around, but he turns his attention back to Duncan, trying to raise his own fists. They circle one another, trying to predict the other one's next move. Delit's breathless and edgy, while Duncan's treating the situation like Delit is the most unpredictable thing he's set his sights on. He huffs out his breath like an animal trying to make himself look bigger. Delit swings a fist, but Duncan grabs his wrist, throwing him into the grass on his back. His air is blown out of his lungs like he fired a shotgun shell through his body. He wheezes and coughs, trying to regain his breath. Duncan doesn't hesitate to grab his collar and forces him back onto his feet. Recalculating his next movements, he shuffles around Delit with his fist held in front of him. Duncan: "Fight me!" Delit: "I don't want to, I just want to go home." He swings his hand through Delit's jaw like a bullet underwater. The strike is so fast that the pain takes a few seconds to register in Delit's mind. The throbbing, the aching, the kisses from the wind feeling like physical middle fingers from Mother Nature. Duncan pushes his whole body forward, his fists injected into Delit's abdomen. He thrusts his chest forward, gagging on his breath before letting out a pained groan. Duncan throws his hands back, shaking his fingers. He balls his fists once more in an attempt to hit Delit once more, but Delit takes action by swiftly dodging his second thrust as well. He jumps towards the school building, hoping that he might be able to reach some kind of faculty member, but the open air does something to his psyche. The world around him just spins like it's on a frisbee, and this causes him to change direction. His hands raised up into the air, his fingers curled inwards to the inner palm of his hand, and he throws his mortal manifestation of a powerful weapon into the face of a fellow human. The connected bone pushing a force through his wrist that reaches his shoulders. His joints feel out of place as the boys just tackle each other. They start throwing a fist at any body part they can reach. Knuckles and skin, knuckles and bone, knuckles and fat, connecting like electricity, they move like they're dancing with each other, hitting so hard that the bruises formulate a color palette across their skin as if they're a different species. The bones are bending and the fists are clenched. Delit throws his hands in Duncan's ribs, getting a breath that hitches out of his vocal vibration, before the young man swings the back of his knuckles through Delit's face, his jaw spitting up the blood on his shirt as he runs up to Duncan, throwing his fist like he's holding a fireball. These instruments of art are used for a battle that the rest of the students don't even understand. They watch in confusion as they're just throwing their fists, giving each a turn to thrust forward and then pull backwards and attempting to block the oncoming punch. They can tell that Duncan is being gentle with Delit, throwing him back on his feet when he stumbles, giving him extra time to recuperate from the impact. Duncan's knuckles are harder. Delit's are like pretzels. He's soft, but Duncan likes the way Delit feels like he's gaining the upper hand over him, how he'll swallow the pain and use it as a way to get back at Duncan, abusing the adrenaline to throw his own knuckles like grenades for hands. He hits Delit in the neck by accident. Delit almost slipped sideways if he didn't jump back. almost hitting the ground backwards. Duncan lunged forward to kneel down, but Delit got scared and jumped on his feet, attempting to run away from Duncan by running through the doors of the school. His knuckles were bruised to the point where the joints felt like knots, and the skin was discolored to the shade of purple and blue crayons mixed together on a piece of sketching paper. The discoloration was smudged and unnatural. The feeling was just as painful as the visual introduction. The pain seemed to get worse when he chose to look at it. He jumped into an open classroom door and thought he'd hide underneath one of the desks. He heard the door swing open several seconds, if not at least a minute, after he was able to locate a proper hiding spot underneath the shadow of the desk. Because the curtains were drawn, it was much harder to see. The classrooms don't have light switches because they don't have lights. Budget cuts that felt useful at the time, considering the students study during the day, but useless on rainy days when the sky can't provide hues without the sun's help. Duncan. Delit? The sound came out like a threat, but was intentionally whispered to produce some kind of concern within Duncan. But the only reason he feels empathetic is because he assumes he might have injured Delit to the point where suspension would then turn into expulsion. Delit put his hands over his mouth, curled up in a ball, his knees under his chin and his eyes sealed like canned food. He quivered in this position, but luckily that didn't make a sound. Duncan started kneeling underneath the desks. It did not take night vision to notice the quivering prop in the back of the class. Duncan lifted himself. He had to think to himself for a second. He could let Delit lie there all afternoon until he'd be sure that Duncan left, or he could drag him out from under the tables and just scuff him up a bit more so he could grow some more attitude. Duncan pushed one desk out of the way, which caused Delit to jump out from his hiding place from the back. He tried running around the classroom as Duncan was jumping furniture like a ninja before throwing Delit into the floor and rolling out into the hallway. His hands could barely fold, but he threw a hook in Duncan's jaw. Able to distract him, Delit jumped out of his grasp, his ankle getting yanked by Duncan, attempting to drag him down. Delit's knees hit the floor before he was rolled onto his back. Duncan's fist slammed the side of his head hard enough for him to see red stars, the glistening blood drying from his nostrils and his mouth. It felt like it's been years since Delit was even aware of the fact that he had blood in his body. The smell was sweeter than he remembered, and can only recall the feeling of pulling his own tooth in the bathroom, staring back at the toddler version of himself in a mirror, wiggling a little loose bone around in his mouth, before his fingers pinched around the tooth, his fingers attempting to wiggle it free. His eye twitching as he started tasting the liquid underneath the root of the tooth. He took a deep breath, nostrils filled with mucus. He started crying, not from the pain, but from the blood. The sight of all the blood in the sink made the pain feel worse than what it was. He spat it out in the sink, and when the so-called tooth fairy dropped off his money, he didn't want to touch it because he'd be sure she'd come for the rest. At least now that fear was nothing more than the early prediction of meeting someone as violently passionate as Duncan.